My name's Dax Kimmelshue, and I've farmed all my life, pretty much. I always say that people, I'm a fifth generation farmer, not all in California, but in farming. And so I have roots in it. That's pretty much all I ever wanted to do. Grew up in a farm family here in Durham and went to the Durham school districts, went to Butte College for 2 years and then transferred to Cal Poly. Graduated there with a degree in agronomy. And I don't know why, because I'm a tree farmer now, but I was agronomy then. So anyway, but that and farming since then. I farm with my wife Karen and my son-in-law Chris Gallion and my daughter Candace Gallion and my son Dustin Kimmelshue. And so we farm English walnuts, almonds, and dry edible beans. What we chose to do back in 1975, my father and Fred Montgomery kind of got together and put their heads together, figured out a way maybe to make use of the soil for a couple of years in between the young trees, and get some revenue off of it for the grower, the landowner, the grower, and whoever else was involved. And so they came up with this idea because we'd grown beans in open field before that, and so it worked out to be a great companion crop for the trees. Both require about the same amount of care, and then they rob a little bit of fertilizer you put on for the beans out to the tree. You don't want a lot of fertilizer on young trees because they just grow too fast. And then about the same amount of irrigation water. So it's they like about the light, frequent irrigations about once a week. And so it's worked out real well, and we've done it over the years, and different varieties of beans, and some work better than others. So we found last year that we tried some extreme vining beans, and that didn't work at all. So we did away with that. It's a bush bean. And we planted in June. We'd start doing a little bit of tillage work in May. We have planted in May, and depending on the length of growing season of the bean, we may do some late May, but usually June. And on the cranberry beans and the yellow beans, the best yields we get are 15th of June to 30th of June, that 2-week stretch in there. The market wants them early. So we have that wrestling with them. Well, get them early. Well, I can get you better beans, big ones. They like big, perfect beans, and they're very picky. So I said, I can get you better quality if you let me plant later. Well, I need them now because I got guys that want them. And so we'll always start in the first part of June, work the ground. We bed it up. We put 30-inch beds, 30 inches apart, 6 30s, and then we sometimes we'll plant dry and irrigate them up. Sometimes we pre-irrigate the beds, work the beds. We spray on a pre-emergent herbicide, keep weeds from coming up, and then we plant down in the moisture if it's been pre-irrigated. If it's dry, we do the same thing. We just plant shallow, and then we irrigate them up. If the sprinkler, solid state sprinklers in there, you can do that very easily. And so keep them damp. And so when they start to poke through, you maybe give them another light irrigation just to kind of make sure there's no crust for them to have to. They're wimpy. They don't want to push. They don't want to work to come through the ground. Beans are just, oh man. So you get them up, and then once you get them through the ground and you got to stand, you're pretty well set. And then they irrigate them, and then we come in and cultivate them when their plants are about this big. And we side dress UN32 alongside of them, and liquid nitrogen fertilizer, and then that's pretty much done unless we have to spray them. You know, usually we don't, but some years we do. So that is, it's a 90-day crop, and so when you're coming up, the beans mature. You have bloom, you have pods, and they start to turn color. The whole plant starts to yellow up, like you probably saw. Well, that over there is more yellow over there. That was just cut this morning. And when they get to that stage where the pods are, the old school was pods are 1/3 dry, 1/3 yellow soft, and 1/3 green. But we want more of these. This variety will want more dry and yellow soft because we want to set this nice yellow color, because that is what the well, see, that's a decent yellow color, but that's not as yellow as, no, that's pretty good. You want that nice shiny or yellow color, and they will have some that are more of a tan color if they don't set right. It's a varietal thing too. This variety of this plant it's a really good variety, and so you want that color because that's what the market wants. So you let them dry down a little bit more than you would cranberries. Cranberries you can cut a little greener, and they'll still make and have that mottled color to them. So we do that, and you cut them, windrow them. They have to cure in the windrow for usually a week this time of year with the normal weather pattern. Get later in the year, if you have some later beans and you've got weather that's giving us problems or something, a little bit of rain or something, you maybe go 10 days, maybe 2 weeks they have to cure. And then you harvest them and they go to the warehouse to get cleaned and bagged. 50-pound bags, and that's what we sell, 50-pound bags. So that's another reason to grow in the month of June. You can stretch it in the first week or so of July and have a really good luck. But weather can be an issue too, because they're laying on the ground, obviously. It rains more than a quarter inch, and then you got to come in and flip the windrow over to kind of air it out, get it dried out, hopefully get some weather after that. Late in the year, if you have beans out late in the year, which we have for many times in the past, then we've had to have them artificially dried, because they got to be at least 15% moisture and lower to store. So that's all part of Mother Nature and farming. So every now and then you'll get a rain around the equinox, the 20th, change in seasons. My dad used to tell me that, but every year we see. This year didn't have it. This disturbance would come through, and sometimes you get a little rain, sometimes you don't. Little bits don't hurt, but usually after that it dries. It's hot enough weather, it dries them in the field, and you just go back after them again and get it. Water irrigation management's important, because you can get diseases in the plants when they're growing, and if the pods are laying on the ground's damp, you can get sclerotinia, white mold it's called, and that discolors the bean. And then you got to hopefully it takes it out. Electric eyes at the warehouse takes them out. Sometimes it doesn't, and then you open it up and there's a few in the bag, and if they open up a bag and they see those, they want to always knock you on price. But I say, no, that's the price. so yeah, it's one of those things, just managing. And we were growing cranberry. We were growing some seed varieties that I really liked out of Idaho that would give us higher yields, but they were a little longer season. They were 90 days, and the ones we grow now are about 80 to 85 days. And but they'd have a tendency to get big plants, and they'd fall over, and they'd fall on the ground, and then we'd have more water damage on those. So we've since gone away from these. And this is the yellow variety, but the cranberry variety we grow is called Etna. And it's a short lived, it's about 80 to 85 days. These are about 85 days. And so from planting to cutting.
Why beans?
And why beans? Probably back to the thought that it's a 90-day crop at the most. And it's a good companion crop they require about the right amount of water as the tree does. And the harvest equipment fits. And a lot of harvesting, the row crop equipment, like corn, you couldn't do corn because it's too tall, you can't irrigate it. You can do sugar beets because you got the harvest equipment, you drive alongside, unload this, the harvester picks up, and then the tank, it's all an inline machine, and you can get off to the side to dump into the bank out, and it fits. I'm trying to think of other crops around here that, some people have done alfalfa. But that has issues with maybe when you're building up a lot of nematode in the soil too, because root knot nematode is prevalent in alfalfa fields. So that you don't want. So and this is pretty much a soil. I mean, there's diseases in the soil that bother the beans after the second year. If you try to do a third year, we've never been real successful doing a third year. But they grow. This is soil around Durham, Chico area. It's beautiful soil, and they like it. And windrows attest to that. They grew well. And this should be a high yielding field right here. So we'll see. But yeah, that's kind of why it was beans, and it was one of the number one crops in the area back when we started doing this. And I don't know that I'd still be doing it if it wasn't for the direct sales into Hispanic grocery stores, because the contract prices were getting to where they were on to pay so much, but your input costs were getting higher. It was getting kind of tough, and so we keep doing a few acres of it every year, and it works out fine. We get a little bit more going direct sales, but it's more work too, the marketing of it. You got to be available to sell them when people want them. They're wanting them right now, and we really don't have any yet. We'll have some hopefully by the end of this week.
And how do you go about marketing?
Mostly I have a couple of employees that work for me, and they market them through their friends and through a network they've developed, and I pay them a commission on how much they sell. And either that it's there's one lady we sell something to. She advertises on radio, Hispanic radio stations. There's some we grow under contract for a company out of Napa. That's all online sales. and so much by the pound. And we've only done that with this company a couple of years, but it's been a good relationship, and it looks like something we'll do in the future. Mm-hmm. And none of them are large, huge acreages. There's 10, 20 acres of contract. The other we'll do between 100 to 200 acres a year total. And so it supplies that market, and you don't want to overproduce it because everyone wants a fresh product. And fresh product means nothing more than a year old. So we try to keep it to some amount that we can market. We pick the best soils, and we'll keep it close to home too, because traveling with equipment costs money. The intercrop, the challenges there are, just fitting the equipment to the row. That's one of the big ones, and leaving enough room on the ends to get the larger equipment turned. A lot of growers like to plant out as close as they can with their trees so they get that extra production, but we constantly are telling them, hold back when you plant that orchard a little bit. If you want to put another row on the outside when we get done, you can do whatever you want, but give us enough room. And then coordinating with, because if we have 4 or 5 different growers we are growing for, plus our own stuff, we have to coordinate that because they want to irrigate the trees while we're doing the groundwork. And so we have to think, okay, when are you going to irrigate? We got to do some groundwork and get beds up so we can pre-irrigate the beds and get ready to plant the crop. And so we have to time it. So we may have a schedule for this field, this field, this field, this field, but that may change. So we have to go this field, this field, this field, back to this field, back to this. So it's a constant change in the planting. Once they're planted and the maturity dictates which one gets cut first. So, and then we jump around at that too. So it's just a coordinate. You have to be able to coordinate and look ahead a lot to get it right. You can't. You don't want to plant too late, and you don't want to plant too early, because early beans usually don't have the size or the color or the yield that beans planted in the month of June usually do best. So that's what we found in the past. So that's when we try to do it.
I often hear from farmers or people in university that there's some sort of threat to fruit trees when you grow crops between the rows, like attracting rodents and gophers, or damaging tree in another way. Have you ever noticed any effect of this practice on fruit trees in short term and long term?
I've never experienced anything like that. Some people could say, well, you're bringing bigger equipment in, tillage equipment maybe, but we find that down to where we get, a minimum amount. We only need a little bit of soil for these things to work. And so we're not doing deep tillage. And if they're worried about root pruning, that's why we only do it for 2 years. The tree gets big. Some fields you only do 1 year. Depends on how the tree grows. Kind of gauged whether the second year is going to be doable or not, depending on how big the tree grew. With the new rootstocks they've got, like crimps on almonds right now, that one the tree does grow faster. So we're not able to do it at the same time, because it's just by the time you get them mature the second year, the trees are huge, and then you're trying to figure out, get the equipment through. It can be tight. As far as diseases go, there isn't any diseases that bother beans and bother trees. If you've got an insect issue, you have to helicopter the spray on anyway, so you're spraying 100% of the acres, so the trees are getting covered. Mites, or we've in the years past we've sprayed for corn earworm. This year we had a big outbreak of armyworm, but armyworm don't bother the pods; they just eat the foliage. So it was towards the end, and so we just let them go, and we were fine on a couple fields. But we had some issues with this year with the yellow beans. This field didn't have an issue with it, I don't think, but we had a field where aphid were bad, black bean aphid were bad, and so we wound up. Well, we sprayed them with helicopter, and it was such a dense mat of plants, we couldn't force it down into it, and so we wound up. The second field we had to do, we wound up chemigating it through the solid state sprinkler system, and that worked really nice because bear droplets, it worked its way down into the plant. We were able to control the aphid, so we learned something with that too. But the other thought is that they say, well, there's a thought from years gone by that you're giving the trees too much water. They want to force those roots to go down, and I thought, well, we've done majority of the orchards around this area in my lifetime, and I can tell you the trees almond trees only last 25 years, and then they start to fall over. They say the trees don't last as long, but it's orchards that weren't done in beans that were, there's no difference. The trees last the same amount of time. People use that maybe as an excuse, but But we've gotten this down to where now growers are saying, yeah, I want that light irrigation every week for the young trees because they respond better, rather than an irrigation every 2 weeks. Later on in the season, when the beans are all closed over, we can get by with a 10-day, 2-week split between irrigation. But early on, when they're small, we got to put water on every week. So, and every week, and just to keep everything happy, the trees respond. So yeah, I haven't experienced anything negative to it about it. We've grown them in our trees, and our trees have done well over the years, and other growers have too. And that's another big challenge we have. There's irrigation systems that you think would cover fine, and the pressure isn't quite right, and so we're constantly the landowner and the Durham pump or the installer, we're saying, well, we need to have 100% coverage if you want to do these for 2 years, and so we have some challenges sometimes, and you're pulling your hair out because you're not getting quite the coverage you'd like to have. So it's the battle with that. For the life of the tree, the system works fine, but if you're doing an intercrop, it doesn't work so good. But a system like this, wherever the head is, it's got morning glory dump strips, but it's here someplace. But this has worked good because it's a system that's been in these trees, and he pulled out the old orchard and put it in the orchard and kept the system. It was real widespread here in the Durham, Chico, Sacramento Valley. Well, I would say Butte County, Glenn County area, in Tama County. Probably 20, 30 years ago, but it's fallen off because of a lot more drip irrigation, which you can do this with drip irrigation. Micro irrigation doesn't allow us to do this. You have to have a solid irrigation. And there's still some growers that like to do it, some that don't care to do it. And they all have the reasons for not wanting to do it, but there's few that have not wanted to do it or starting to look at it again. And if there's a possibility to generate some revenue to help pay for water, help pay for care for the trees when they're young. So it's I don't know. I've seen varieties of beans growing in the San Joaquin Valley as I've driven down through there, but it's not real widespread. And so there's the other crops have been grown, alfalfa and hay, winter hay. It's been done in between trees also. But yeah, you have to adapt equipment to fit between the trees, and we do it for 2 years when the trees are small. Even when the tree gets bigger, you can't do it anymore, of course. And it's time for the trees just to farm the trees and not the intercrop and the trees.